The day began like any other in the grand office tower that stood tall in the middle of the busy city. The streets below were alive with cars rushing to their destinations, people hurrying with coffee cups in their hands, and the sound of horns blending with footsteps. On the top floor of the tower, where the glass windows reflected the sunlight and gave a wide view of the city, a man sat behind a large wooden desk. He was the CEO, a millionaire known for his sharp mind, strict discipline, and an extremely busy schedule. His days were often filled with meetings, reports, and phone calls that left no space for anything unplanned. This morning was no different. His assistant walked in holding a thick file of documents that needed signing. The CEO nodded without lifting his eyes from the laptop screen. Numbers filled the screen, financial reports that demanded his full attention. He had no time for distractions. Everything in his life was organized, from the moment he stepped into the office until the time he left. But sometimes, life has a way of sending surprises when least expected. Just as the CEO finished reading through a report, his assistant knocked softly on the door. Her voice carried hesitation, something unusual for her calm and confident tone. "Sir," she said, "there's someone waiting outside. She says she has an appointment, but she's just a little girl." The CEO frowned slightly. He wasn't used to hearing such a statement. A little girl? In his office? His schedule was already packed, and there was no mention of a child on the appointment list. "A little girl," he repeated, lowering his glasses and looking at the assistant with clear disbelief. "Yes, sir," the assistant replied, almost unsure if she should have even allowed the child into the waiting area. "She says her mother was supposed to meet you today, but she couldn't come. So the girl came in her place." The CEO leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the polished surface of the desk. This was highly unusual. In the world of business, people came in suits, carrying presentations and proposals, not children holding onto innocence and nervous smiles. For a moment, he thought about refusing. He was, after all, a man of time, and time was money. But then curiosity touched him. What kind of child would have the courage to walk into the office of one of the busiest and wealthiest men in the city? "Send her in," he said finally, his voice calm but filled with a mix of curiosity and caution. The assistant nodded and disappeared. A minute later, the sound of small footsteps echoed softly in the hallway. Then the door opened, and there she was, a little girl, no older than 10, standing at the doorway with her hands clutched tightly around a small folder. She wore a simple dress, the kind that showed care but not wealth, and her hair was neatly tied in 2 braids. Her eyes, though filled with nervousness, carried something else too: determination. For a moment, the CEO remained silent, simply observing her. The office that often welcomed powerful figures, lawyers, investors, and government officials now held the presence of a child. The contrast was striking. The girl stepped forward slowly, her shoes making soft sounds against the floor, and finally stopped in front of his desk. She took a deep breath, as if gathering all the courage she had, and spoke in a small but clear voice. "Good morning, sir," she said. "Mom's sick, so I came instead." The words, though simple, carried weight. The CEO blinked, almost taken aback. He had expected excuses, perhaps nervous mumbling, but not this straightforward honesty. "You came instead," he repeated, leaning forward slightly. The girl nodded, holding the folder tightly against her chest. Her little fingers trembled, but her eyes did not leave his. "Yes, sir. My mom had an appointment with you today, but she is not well. She wanted to be here, but she couldn't get out of bed. She has worked very hard for this, and she was so worried she would lose her chance. So I came instead." There was silence in the room for a few seconds. The ticking of the clock on the wall suddenly felt louder than before. The CEO studied her closely. He was a man used to reading faces, analyzing every detail to know whether someone was confident, scared, or hiding something. On this little girl's face, he saw honesty. Pure honesty. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Anna," she replied quickly. "Anna Williams." "Anna," the CEO repeated, as if testing the name in his mind. "And what exactly did your mother want to discuss with me?" Anna looked down at the folder in her hands. She carefully opened it and placed it on the desk. Inside were neatly arranged papers, charts drawn with care, and handwritten notes. "She wanted to show you her idea. She has worked on it for months. She told me it was very important, and she said you were the only one who could help make it real. I don't know everything in here," she admitted, her voice softening, "but I promised her I would at least give this to you." The CEO leaned back, surprised again. Children her age usually carried toys, books, or school bags. Yet this child was carrying her mother's dreams. Something stirred within him, something that the busy world of business often buried under deadlines and targets: compassion. He glanced at the assistant standing quietly by the door, then looked back at Anna. Her little hands rested on the folder as if protecting it with her life. There was nothing fake about her. No hidden agendas. Just a child trying to help her mother. The CEO cleared his throat. "Anna, do you know who I am?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "You are the boss here. Mom says you are the kind of person who makes big decisions, and that's why it's important for you to see this. She believes in her idea very much. She told me never to give up on it." Her voice cracked slightly at the last words, but she quickly straightened her back as if reminding herself to be strong. The CEO felt a strange pull at his heart, something he hadn't felt in years. In his world, people came with polished words, rehearsed pitches, and confident handshakes. But here was a child, with no preparation other than love for her mother, standing bravely in front of him. He gestured toward the chair opposite him. "Sit down, Anna," he said gently. Anna nodded and climbed onto the chair. Her legs were too short to reach the floor, so they hung freely, swinging slightly back and forth. She placed her hands on her lap, waiting quietly, her eyes still fixed on him. The CEO opened the folder and began to glance through the papers. He wasn't sure yet what he would do, but one thing was certain: this unexpected visit had already turned an ordinary day into something extraordinary. At that moment, he didn't just see a folder filled with ideas, he saw a daughter's courage, a mother's struggle, and a story that was about to unfold in a way he had never imagined. Anna sat in the chair opposite the CEO, her small frame looking even smaller against the high leather seat. She pressed her hands together tightly, as if holding onto her courage with all her strength. The CEO, still studying her with curiosity, closed the folder for a moment and asked, "Anna, do you know what's inside here?" Anna shook her head honestly. "Not everything," she admitted softly. "Mom tried to explain, but some of it is very hard to understand. She said it's about helping people and about something she made better. She worked on it every night after finishing all the house chores. She even stayed up when she was very tired." The CEO tilted his head, watching her carefully. Her voice was filled with respect for her mother, but also a kind of sadness. "So why did you come here today, Anna?" he asked gently. She looked up at him with wide eyes. "Because Mom told me this meeting was very important. She said she could not miss it, but this morning, she couldn't even get out of bed. She was coughing and so weak. She kept saying, 'I promised him, I can't fail.' I didn't want her to worry anymore. So I told her, 'Don't be scared, Mom. I'll go for you.' She said no at first, but I told her that if she didn't let me, she might lose her chance forever. So she agreed, and here I am." The CEO felt something stir inside him again. In his long career, he had seen many people fight for contracts, for projects, for money. But he had never seen a child so brave, taking responsibility for her sick mother's dream. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes resting on the little girl's hopeful face. "Anna," he said, "do you understand how big this meeting is? Grown ups come here nervous, with months of preparation, and they still struggle. And yet, you came all alone. Weren't you scared?" Anna hesitated for a moment. Her small hands twisted in her lap. "Yes," she whispered. "I was scared. The building is so big, and everyone kept looking at me like I was lost. But then I thought about Mom. She has done so much for me. She never gives up, even when she is sick or tired. I thought if she can be so strong every day, then I can be strong for one day. That's why I kept walking until I reached your office." The CEO stayed silent, his eyes softening. He remembered his own childhood, years ago, when he had nothing. He had once been a boy who saw his own mother work day and night just to keep food on the table. The memory came back to him so strongly that for a moment, he forgot the world of suits and business. He saw himself in Anna, and he saw his mother in Anna's mother. Breaking the silence, Anna carefully pushed the folder closer toward him. "Mom said you would understand if you saw this," she said, her voice filled with trust. "She told me to make sure you got it, even if I couldn't explain everything." The CEO opened the folder again. Inside were sketches, charts, and neatly typed pages. He noticed the handwriting in some places, little notes written in the margins with care. It was clear the woman had poured not just knowledge but heart into the work. He turned a few pages, his experienced eyes quickly catching details. He wasn't ready to admit it out loud, but it was impressive. As he read, Anna watched him closely. She tried to sit still, but her feet kept swinging slowly, tapping the chair. After a while, she spoke again, her voice breaking the heavy silence. "Sir, I don't know what you will decide. Maybe you will say no. But I just wanted to tell you one thing. My mom is the bravest person I know. She always smiles at me, even when she is in pain. She says one day things will be better, and she believes this idea can change our life. That's why she works so hard. I didn't want her to lose hope. That's why I came." Her words were simple, but they carried more power than any rehearsed presentation. The CEO slowly placed the folder on the desk and looked at her. His heart was touched in a way that surprised him. For years, he had built walls around himself, protecting his time, his money, his energy. He had forgotten what it felt like to see pure honesty, without hidden motives. "Anna," he said, "do you know what it means to fight for something you believe in?" She nodded quickly. "It means you don't give up, even if it's hard." He smiled faintly. "That's right. And today, you showed me what that looks like." Anna's eyes lit up with a mixture of relief and pride. For the first time since she entered the office, she felt her nervousness fade just a little. She knew her mom would be proud too, knowing she had spoken bravely. The CEO leaned forward, resting his arms on the desk. "Your mother must be very proud of you," he said gently. Anna's lips curved into a small smile. "I hope so," she whispered. "I just want her to rest and not worry anymore. She is always thinking about everyone else, never about herself. She deserves something good to happen." The CEO didn't reply immediately. He was lost in thought. He kept looking at the little girl, who had walked into his office without fear, carrying not just papers but hope. It was something rare, something money couldn't buy. Finally, he asked softly, "Anna, do you believe your mother's idea can really work?" Anna didn't even pause. "Yes," she said with confidence. "Because she believes in it. And when she believes in something, she always finds a way." The CEO smiled again, this time more warmly. He closed the folder and tapped it lightly. "All right. Then I think it deserves my attention." Anna's eyes widened with surprise. Really? She asked, almost breathless. Really? He nodded. I will take this seriously. But more than that, I want to meet your mother when she feels better. She has raised a very brave daughter, and I think her work must be just as strong. For a second, Anna didn't know what to say. Then her face broke into a smile so bright that even the cold, serious office seemed warmer. Thank you, sir, she said, her voice full of relief. At that moment, the CEO realized something important. The meeting wasn't just about a business proposal. It was about courage, love, and sacrifice. A little girl had walked into his office not just to deliver papers, but to remind him of something he had nearly forgotten: why people dream, why they fight, and why kindness matters. As Anna sat quietly, waiting for his next words, the CEO knew this was only the beginning. Something in his heart told him that this encounter would change not only Anna's life and her mother's future but also his own. The CEO sat quietly for a long moment after Anna finished speaking. The sound of the clock ticking on the wall and the faint hum of the city outside were the only noises in the room. He had faced countless meetings in his life, some with the richest people in the country, some with politicians, some with business leaders from around the world. Yet none of them had left him as speechless as this little girl sitting across from him with her feet dangling above the floor. Anna waited patiently, her small hands folded on her lap. She didn't rush him. She didn't push. She simply sat there with the kind of quiet patience that only comes from someone who truly believes in the goodness of what they are asking. Her eyes never left his face. They were wide, honest, and full of something the CEO hadn't seen in a long time: pure trust. Finally, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. Anna, he said gently, do you know that most people who come here are very nervous? They practice their words for weeks, sometimes months. They bring presentations, they talk for hours, and they try very hard to impress me. Anna blinked, her expression curious. Really? She asked softly. Yes, the CEO nodded. But you didn't do any of that. You just came here and told me the truth. Do you know how rare that is? Anna thought for a moment. Then she shook her head. I don't know, she admitted honestly. But Mom always says telling the truth is the best thing. Even if it's scary, you should never lie. The CEO couldn't help but smile faintly. It was such a simple lesson, one every child hears, yet so many adults forget. He looked down at the folder again and slowly flipped through a few more pages. The more he read, the more he realized this wasn't just a random idea. Anna's mother had worked very hard. The proposal was neat, creative, and practical. There was thought, dedication, and heart behind it. He closed the folder and looked back at Anna. Your mother must be a very strong woman, he said. Anna's face lit up with pride. She is the strongest person I know, she replied quickly. Even when she is tired, she makes sure I eat before she does. Even when she doesn't feel well, she smiles and tells me not to worry. She works late at night, and sometimes I see her fall asleep at the table with all these papers in front of her. I put a blanket on her so she doesn't get cold. The CEO listened carefully. Each word Anna spoke touched something deep inside him. He remembered his own mother again, the way she used to work in a small shop when he was a boy, the way she would put aside her own needs to make sure he had what he needed for school. He remembered how she once said, as long as you keep trying, son, one day life will be better. Hearing Anna talk about her mother felt like hearing echoes of his own past. He cleared his throat and asked, and what about you, Anna? What do you want to be when you grow up? Anna looked down at her hands for a moment, then back up at him. I want to help my mom, she said softly. I don't know what job I want yet. Maybe a teacher, maybe a doctor, maybe someone who makes big decisions like you. But I know one thing: I don't want my mom to be sad or tired anymore. I want her to rest. I want her to smile more. The CEO felt a heaviness in his chest. He was used to people telling him they wanted success, money, power, or fame. But this child's dream was so different, so selfless. She didn't want toys, she didn't want riches, she wanted her mother's happiness. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Anna, he said, you remind me of something very important. Sometimes in business, we forget what truly matters. We start to think everything is about profit and numbers. But today, you reminded me it's about people, too. About families, about love. Anna's eyes softened. She didn't fully understand the weight of his words, but she knew he was speaking kindly. Mom says people should help each other, she replied. She says even small kindness can change someone's life. The CEO nodded slowly. He couldn't deny the truth of that. Just then, his assistant, who had been standing quietly by the door, cleared her throat. She seemed moved too, though she tried to hide it. Sir, you still have 2 more meetings waiting, she said softly, almost as if she didn't want to break the atmosphere in the room. The CEO looked at his watch, then at Anna. For the first time in years, he felt no rush. He waved his hand slightly toward his assistant. Tell them to wait, he said firmly. This is more important. The assistant's eyebrows lifted slightly, surprised. The CEO never delayed meetings. But she nodded and stepped out quietly. The CEO turned back to Anna. Would you like to tell me more about your mother, he asked. Anna's face brightened again. She leaned forward eagerly, her nervousness now replaced by excitement. Oh yes, she said quickly. She's amazing. She can fix almost anything in the house. She makes the best soup when I'm sick. She helps neighbors when they need something, even if she doesn't have much herself. And she always says, never give up, Anna. Even when it feels hard, just keep going. That's why I came here today. I wanted to be like her. I wanted to keep going, even if I was scared. Her voice cracked a little at the end, but she smiled bravely. The CEO felt his heart soften more and more. He thought about the woman who had raised this child. A woman who, even in her illness, had inspired her daughter with strength and kindness. He thought about the courage it took for Anna to walk into this building, ride the elevator to the top floor, and enter an office that intimidated even adults. He realized this wasn't just about a business meeting. It was about seeing life through the eyes of a child, pure, simple, and full of love. The CEO took a deep breath. Anna, he said finally, you have taught me more in this 1 hour than many people have taught me in years. Anna tilted her head slightly, not fully understanding, but she smiled anyway. Does that mean you will help my mom? She asked hopefully. The CEO looked at the folder again, then back at her. He could feel the decision forming in his heart. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking only like a businessman. He was thinking like a human being, like a son who had once been cared for by a mother, like a father who could imagine his own child sitting where Anna sat now. Yes, he said slowly, but firmly. I will help your mom. I promise. Anna gasped softly, her little hands clapping together before she quickly covered her mouth in surprise. Her eyes shone with tears, but they were happy tears. Thank you, sir, she whispered. Thank you so much. The CEO smiled gently. For the first time that day, the office didn't feel like a cold place of business. It felt warm, filled with something greater than success, filled with humanity. And he knew this was only the beginning of what he was about to do for Anna and her mother. The CEO sat with the folder open in front of him, his eyes carefully moving across the pages. Anna sat opposite him, her small frame leaning forward, watching his every move with quiet anticipation. Her hands rested on her knees, but every few seconds she shifted in her chair, as if her nervousness wouldn't let her stay completely still. The silence in the room grew heavier with each page he turned. For Anna, every tick of the clock felt like a drum beat inside her chest. She didn't know what he was thinking. She didn't understand the numbers, the charts, or the graphs. All she knew was that her mother's hard work was inside those papers, and right now, her mother's hope rested on the man sitting across the desk. The CEO, on the other hand, was no stranger to proposals. He had seen thousands of them in his career. Many were polished, with glossy covers and expensive presentations. But this one was different. It wasn't fancy, but it was detailed. It wasn't perfect, but it was thoughtful. He could tell every word had been written with care. There were notes in the margins, corrections scribbled in pen, and even a few coffee stains on the pages, evidence of late nights spent working. This wasn't just a business plan. It was a story of determination. He looked up from the folder and studied Anna again. "Did your mother explain to you what this idea is about?" he asked gently. Anna shook her head. "Not everything," she admitted. "She told me it's something that can help people. She said it's not just for money, but to make life easier for others. That's all I know." The CEO tapped his fingers lightly on the desk, thinking. There was something refreshing about hearing those words. Most people who came to him spoke only about profits and returns. But here was a little girl telling him her mother's dream wasn't about riches, it was about helping. He leaned back in his chair, closing the folder. "Anna," he said softly, "do you know why I'm reading this so carefully?" Anna hesitated before answering. "Because it's important," she guessed. The CEO smiled faintly. "Yes. But also because I want to see what kind of heart your mother has. And from what I see here, she has a very strong one." Anna's face brightened, her eyes shining with pride. "She does," she said quickly. "She always says, even if you don't have much, you can still give something. She helps people, even when she is tired or sick. That's why I believe in her idea. If she thinks it can help, then I know it must be good." Her words were simple, yet they pierced deep into the CEO's mind. He had spent years surrounded by businessmen and women who measured life in numbers. But in that moment, he was reminded that real value couldn't always be measured on paper. He leaned forward again. "Anna, do you know that not everyone would have been brave enough to come here today?" Anna shrugged slightly. "I was scared," she admitted. "When I walked into the building, everyone looked at me like I didn't belong. The elevator felt so big, and I thought maybe I should go back. But then I remembered Mom's face this morning. She was so sad. I didn't want her to lose hope. So I told myself, you can do this. Just be brave one more time." The CEO felt his throat tighten slightly. Her words reminded him of his own childhood struggles. He remembered being a boy with no money, walking into rooms where he felt he didn't belong, trying to prove himself in a world that didn't always welcome him. He understood her fear and her courage. He reached for the folder again and opened it to a particular section. The idea described there was practical, but it also carried compassion. It was something that could benefit people who usually went unnoticed. As he read, his respect for Anna's mother grew. He looked back at Anna. "Do you know what impresses me the most?" he asked. Anna tilted her head. "What?" "That you came here," he said. "You didn't know what was inside this folder. You didn't know what I would say. But you still walked into this office, sat in front of me, and spoke from your heart. That takes more courage than most adults I've met." Anna's cheeks turned pink, and she smiled shyly. "I just wanted to help Mom," she whispered. "And you did," the CEO said firmly. "You've already done more than you realize." He pushed the folder aside and looked at her directly. "Anna, I want to ask you something. If I decide to help your mother with this project, what would you like the first thing to be?" "Something for you." Something for her. Anna didn't even pause to think. For her, she answered quickly. I want her to get better. I want her to rest. I want her to be happy. The CEO felt his chest grow heavy with emotion. He wasn't used to hearing such selflessness. Most people ask for more money, more success, more recognition. But this child asked only for her mother's health and happiness. At that moment, the CEO knew his decision was made. He would help. Not only because the project had potential, but because the woman behind it had clearly raised a daughter with strength, honesty, and love. That kind of foundation deserved support. But before he gave his answer, he decided to test something. He leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. Anna, what if I told you I wasn't sure about this idea? What if I said I might not help? Anna froze for a moment, her eyes wide. Her small fingers twisted nervously in her lap. But then she took a deep breath, straightened her back, and spoke softly. Then I would say, thank you for listening. And I would tell Mom not to give up. Because she always tells me that one no doesn't mean it's the end. It just means we have to keep trying until someone says yes. The CEO felt a smile spread across his face, but it wasn't the kind of smile he gave in board meetings. It was genuine, touched with admiration. That, he said slowly, is exactly why I believe your mother deserves a chance. And why I want to help her. Anna gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of relief and joy. You mean it, she whispered. I mean it, the CEO nodded firmly. But more than that, I want to make sure your mother is well. So the first thing I'm going to do is send a doctor to check on her. After that, I'll arrange a meeting with her as soon as she feels better. And when she's ready, we'll talk about how to bring this idea to life. Anna's tears spilled over, and she quickly wiped them with the back of her hand. Thank you, sir, she whispered, her voice trembling. You don't know how much this means. The CEO leaned back, watching her with quiet admiration. He realized that today wasn't just about a folder full of papers. It was about being reminded of something he had long forgotten, that business wasn't only about profit. It was about people, about courage, about compassion. Anna sat there, her heart beating fast with joy. She had come into the office scared, unsure of what would happen. But now she knew she had done what her mother had hoped. She had kept the dream alive. And more than that, she had found kindness in a place she least expected it. The CEO closed the folder and placed it carefully on his desk. Anna, he said gently, you've done something incredible today. You didn't just bring me your mother's idea. You reminded me of something far more valuable. What's that? Anna asked softly. That sometimes the bravest voices come from the smallest people, he replied with a smile. Anna smiled back, her heart full. She didn't fully understand the depth of his words, but she knew she had done something good for her mother, and maybe even for the man sitting across from her. And in that moment, the office didn't feel like a place of business anymore. It felt like a place where hearts had connected, where kindness had found its way into a busy world, and where a little girl's courage had opened a door no one else could. Anna sat quietly in the chair, her eyes still shining with unshed tears. She could hardly believe what she had just heard. The most powerful man she had ever met, someone who usually made decisions for companies and millions of dollars, had promised to help her mother. For a child who had walked into the office with trembling hands and a racing heart, it felt like a dream come true. The CEO, meanwhile, leaned back in his chair, watching her closely. He felt something unusual, something he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't pride in closing a deal or excitement over numbers. It was something softer, something that touched his soul. He realized that this little girl had changed the rhythm of his entire day. She had walked in with nothing but her honesty, and somehow, she had reminded him of his own humanity. He pressed the intercom button on his desk and asked his assistant to return. A moment later, she entered, carrying a polite but curious expression. The CEO, who usually gave instructions in a brisk and business-like tone, spoke more gently this time. "Cancel the rest of my morning meetings," he said. The assistant blinked, surprised. "All of them, sir?" "Yes, all of them," the CEO confirmed. "Today, this comes first." She nodded slowly, still surprised, and left the room. Anna's mouth opened slightly. "Did I make you miss your work?" she asked nervously. The CEO chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Anna, sometimes the most important work isn't in the papers we sign or the meetings we attend. Sometimes, it's about doing the right thing for people. And today, helping your mother is the most important work I can do." Anna's lips curved into a small smile. She didn't fully understand his world, but she knew his words carried kindness. The CEO leaned forward. "Tell me, Anna, how is your mother right now? How sick is she?" Anna's smile faded a little. "She's very weak," she admitted. "This morning she couldn't even sit up properly. She kept coughing, and she looked so tired. She tried to tell me not to come, but I couldn't let her lose this chance. I just want her to get better." The CEO nodded thoughtfully. "Then that's the first step. We'll make sure she gets the best medical care." Anna's eyes widened. "You will?" "Yes," he said firmly. "I'll arrange for a doctor to visit her at home today. Whatever she needs, we'll provide." Anna's hands clapped together before she covered her mouth in surprise. Her eyes filled with gratitude, and she whispered, "Thank you, sir. She will be so happy." The CEO felt his chest tighten. It wasn't often that he saw such pure joy over something as simple as care and kindness. It reminded him of days when he was younger, when his own family had struggled, and small gestures had felt like miracles. He looked at the folder again and then back at Anna. "Your mother's idea is worth supporting," he said. "But more than that, I want her to know she is not alone. She has carried too much on her shoulders, and now, it's time for someone to help carry her dreams." Anna's small shoulders relaxed for the first time since she had walked into the office. She leaned back in the chair, relief spreading across her face. For the CEO, the moment felt almost sacred. He had spent years building walls around himself, keeping business and emotions separate. Yet here he was, moved deeply by a little girl's courage. After a few moments of silence, he stood up from his chair and walked around the desk. Anna looked up at him, unsure of what he was about to do. To her surprise, he knelt down so he was at her eye level. The powerful man who usually towered over rooms now lowered himself to speak to her as an equal. "Anna," he said softly, "you may not realize it, but today, you did something incredible. You showed me bravery. You showed me honesty. And you reminded me of something I had almost forgotten, that business is not only about money, but about people and kindness. I will never forget this day." Anna's eyes filled with tears again, and she whispered, "I just wanted to help my mom." "And you did," the CEO said with a smile. "More than you'll ever know." He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Now, I want you to go home to your mother. Tell her to rest and not worry. Tell her I'll visit soon, and we'll talk about her idea when she feels better." Anna nodded quickly, her braids bouncing. "I will. She will be so happy." The CEO stood up again and walked her to the door. Before she left, he handed her the folder back. "This belongs to your mother," he said. "Take it home, and tell her I'll take care of everything." Anna hugged the folder tightly to her chest. She looked up at him one last time and said, "Thank you, sir. You're very kind." The CEO watched as she walked out of the office, her small figure disappearing down the hallway. For a long time after she left, he stood by the window, staring out at the city below. But today, the tall buildings and busy streets didn't capture his thoughts. Instead, he thought about Anna's courage, her mother's determination, and the promise he had just made. True to his word, he arranged for a doctor to visit Anna's home that very afternoon. The doctor reported back that her mother was weak but would recover well with the right treatment. The CEO didn't stop there. He quietly arranged for medicine, healthy food deliveries, and even a small financial fund to ease their struggles. When Anna's mother heard what had happened, she couldn't hold back her tears. She hugged Anna tightly, overwhelmed by her daughter's bravery and the kindness of the man she had met. "You did what I couldn't," she whispered. "You kept the dream alive." Days later, when she was stronger, the CEO visited their modest home. He didn't come with a team of assistants or bodyguards. He came quietly, with humility. When he sat down with Anna's mother, he listened carefully as she explained her idea in her own words. And just as he had suspected, it wasn't just a business plan, it was a vision to help others. He gave her the support she needed. Together, they worked on the project, step by step. And slowly, it grew into something bigger than anyone had imagined. For the CEO, it wasn't just another investment. It was a chance to do something meaningful. For Anna's mother, it was the reward of years of hard work. And for Anna, it was proof that courage and love could open doors that once seemed impossible. But perhaps the greatest change was in the CEO himself. He began to see his work differently. He started looking for ideas that not only made money but also made a difference in people's lives. And whenever he felt tired or overwhelmed, he remembered the day a little girl had walked into his office and said, "Mom's sick, so I came instead." That one moment had changed him forever. And as for Anna, she grew up carrying that memory in her heart, the memory of how her love for her mother had led her to face her fears, and how her small act of courage had inspired a man to choose kindness over profit. It became a story she would tell again and again, not because it was about wealth or success, but because it was about something far more powerful: the strength of love, the courage of a child, and the reminder that even the busiest hearts can be touched when kindness enters the room.